So then the organism is always looking in the external environment to determine what's going to be a threat, always concerned about its body and where it has to, how it has to take care of it, and it's always concerned about time. How much time do I have to get there? The body, the environment, and time.
Welcome to Good Vibes. We are dedicated to raise your vibration to make you inspired and make your day. Before we start, hit the subscribe button and the bell button next to it. As you see, most of you guys that enjoy our videos aren't subscribed, so subscribe and don't miss our new videos. Enjoy the video.
Now, when you and I live by the hormones of stress, the very fact that we're releasing all these chemicals, by paying all of our attention on the external environment, we focus on objects and things, and we believe that the outer world is more real than the inner world, and this is where we start to feel separation. Now, why do we feel separation? Because the hormones of stress cause us to begin to really begin to understand or perceive reality as a materialist, defining reality with our senses. So the atom is 99.9999999% nothing. It's energy, it's emptiness, it's open space. It's 0.0000001% particle. And when we're living by the hormones of stress, we're focusing on the particle instead of on possibility. And this is where we get in trouble, because when we get to this point and we experience that level of separation, we always try to force and control outcomes in our life because we are matter trying to change matter. In other words, when we live by the hormones of stress, we feel more like matter and less like energy because we are fundamentally functioning as a particle instead of possibility. So then people then begin to use what they know in terms of their limited resources to get what they want. They compete, they manipulate, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they do what they can to try to get ahead in their life because for the most part, they don't know that there's any other way to do it. They're functioning from a primitive nervous system. But when people begin to get beyond themselves, and we've studied the brains in the workshops that we've done, and you and I are absolutely at our best when we get beyond ourselves. The moment you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, in no time, the moment you and I become pure consciousness, the moment we get beyond our identities, our bodies, our faces, our culture, our gender, our hairstyles, our wardrobes, we get beyond the things we own, the people we know, the places we lived, we get beyond our pain, our emotions, our habits. That's the moment, no longer trying to predict the familiar future based on the memory of the past. That's the moment we become pure consciousness. In other words, we become thought alone. And that's the moment the body is literally releasing energy. And we go from particle to wave, from matter to energy. And the side effect of that is our heart begins to open. The brain gets very coherent. The heart begins to work with the brain. We broadcast a whole new electromagnetic signature. And instead of trying to predict the worst case scenario and get ready for it, we trust in the unknown. We trust in possibility. We begin to lay down the very thing we used our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur. And so it's a skill, and you can teach people how to do this. And when people stop living by those limited emotions and they start opening their heart, they feel connected to something greater. And the moment they feel connected to something greater, they're no longer trying to force or control the outcome. They're getting out of the way and allowing the universe to organize it in a way that's just right for them. So the problem, I think, for most of us, me included, to answer your question, is that you and I and most people in our lives, we wait for our life to get so unbearable that crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss, something has to bring us to this lowest denominator in order for us to want to change. And this is a beautiful time in history, Panache, because people are beginning to realize that they don't have to wait for that. They can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or they can learn and change in a state of joy or inspiration. So, is there a connection between our authentic self and the soul, and how do we get there? Well, I think for most of us then, we begin to, we're young and we have a lot of confusing things that happen to us in our life. And when we're young, most of our attention is on our inner world. And as we begin to grow up and we meet friends and we move to different places and we own different things, we become very consumed with the external environment. And we begin to create an identity by the people we know and the places we go and the things we do. And all of our attention goes to the external environment, and we don't want to pay a lot of attention to our inner world. So that works probably for the first 35 or 40 years of our life. And then after you experience everything that life has to offer, all of a sudden, nothing's making that feeling go away. And this is the moment the soul begins to wake us up and say, pay attention, because nothing is making that feeling change. So in other words, when you can predict the feeling of everything that's going on in your life, and nothing new is happening, all of a sudden you're left with those feelings from very early on, whether it's emptiness or unworthiness or insecurity. And so then this is where people all of a sudden have to make a choice. Some people, they buy the sports car, they buy the new boat, they join the new social club, they meet new people, they have affairs, they go on vacation to a new place, they buy new things. But when the novelty of all of those events wear off, here comes that feeling again. And so then other people, they begin to look at those emotions and they don't want to keep that facade going on any longer. In other words, this is how we appear to the world. This is the facade, this is the identity, this is the image, and this is how we really feel inside. Now, this person is identifying, creating an identity with the external world so that nobody knows how they really feel inside. Now, everybody's doing the same exact thing. So God forbid anybody finds out that we're insecure or feeling empty. So you have to keep this facade going on with your identity in the environment and your body and the way you look and how busy you are, so that you don't have to look at this. Now, some people begin to look at this feeling, and this is the midlife crisis. This is where they say, I don't love you. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like those people. I don't want to keep this going any longer anymore. And they begin to pay attention to this feeling. Now, there's not a lot of structure in our Western world to do that. So the moment people begin to lose their mind and they begin to tell the truth about who they are, they begin to break their emotional bonds with everybody in their life. That's when they go to the doctor and get Prozac, and there they go. You know, they return right back to that person. But this gap between how we appear to the world and who we really are inside is based on the amount of emotions that we've memorized from past experiences. Now, when we begin, there's pain there, there's sadness there, there's unworthiness there, there's insecurity there, and we're not looking for the external environment to make this feeling go away. In other words, we start looking at how we think when we feel this way, how we act when we feel this way, and we begin to move through those emotions, and we begin to overcome them. Every time we overcome an emotion, we liberate energy, and we begin to close the gap between how we appear to the world and who we are inside, until how we appear is who we are. We've liberated all this energy. That's the moment we call transparency, and that's the moment where the person is truly happy, no longer needing anything outside of them to make them happy, but the true happiness is coming from within them. In other words, so many people confuse pleasure and happiness. And pleasure is the accumulation of things to feel good, and happiness is coming from within. So that intelligence that's giving us life right now, that's digesting our food and organizing trillions of functions in one cell every single second and organizing DNA, that self-organizing intelligence is looking for a crack to leak out. And when it begins to leak out, it begins to consume us. And that's the moment we become like it. We become more loving. It's a loving intelligence. We become more mindful. It's a great mind. We become more willful. It's got an amazing will. Its nature becomes our nature. We become more giving. It's a giver of life. So I think when we begin to all of a sudden realize that there's nothing wrong with the accumulation of things, but I think we've been conditioned into believing that true happiness, changing everything in our external world, and true change comes from trying to do it from the outside instead of doing it from within. And I think this is, again, really important for us, because as we begin to overcome that, those limited states, the body's no longer living in the past. And that's where most of our pain comes from, is when the body's living in the past. And And we've measured so many people in the process of transformation. And when they get beyond their past, they're pretty unlimited people. And the side effect of that is true joy and true expression of life, which I call the natural state of being. So when people are living in this gap between how they appear to the world and how they really feeling, they don't want to look at this emotion because it is painful. What they'd rather do is distract themselves from all these things in their external environment so they don't have to look. But when that feeling isn't going away, and they can't, after the sports car and after the vacation and after the buying the new things, the new wardrobe, the facelift, whatever, and this feeling keeps returning, this is a time really where they have to look at that emotion. And they have to, as you said, you have to be in the presence of that emotion and ask some fundamental questions. Are these emotions driving my thoughts? How do I think when I feel this way? Now, those thoughts are just old circuits that have been fired and wired in the brain. How do I behave? What do I do? How do I act? What do I say? What comes out of my mouth? Now think about this. If you can observe how you're thinking, notice how you're acting, and pay attention to how you're feeling, the moment you become conscious of what you're unconscious to, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program, and this is when we begin to objectify our subjective selves. And the more we can look at ourselves through the eyes of someone else, the more conscious we can become of that, the less unconscious we're prone to be in our normal life.
You know, I mean, if I approached somebody listening to this show and I'd say, "What's wrong with you?" And, "Oh, I'm in a bad mood today." "Well, why are you in a bad mood?" "Well, because of my coworker, because of my staff, because of my stats, because of the news, because of my ex. What they're really saying is, unconsciously now in a program, that something outside of me, some person or circumstance, is controlling the way I feel and the way I think. And anything that's controlling the way you feel and think makes you victim to your environment. Now, that unconscious program then means that a person who's living by that every day will be more susceptible to any condition in their environment, because it's their response to the environment that is squandering the amount of energy they need to heal. So then in order for them to heal, then they have to turn the battleship around and say, well, wait a second. I could complain, that would be normal and natural. I have 1,000 reasons to be unhappy, but instead of allowing my environment to control how I think and feel, what if how I think and feel can produce an effect in my environment? Now all of a sudden, the game changes, because you are going to inhibit those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. And in the moment where, whether it's justified or valid or not, for you to be angry, frustrated, fearful, sad, pain, whatever, to no longer allow your environment to control it, and you begin to self-regulate, and that's adaptability. And we teach people that you could actually develop this skill. And when you do it properly, and you get back into that kind of heart and brain coherence, you save yourself from going unconscious for the remainder of the day and running some type of program. So it feels unnatural in the beginning, because basically the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, buckle up, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. You are going to leave known territory and you're stepping into the unknown. Now, most people, their habituations and their conditioning of remembering something from the past, and that memory is just thoughts of different people and circumstances, of different things at certain times and places, tattooed in the recesses of their gray matter. So the moment they think of their problems, they're thinking in the past. But every one of those past experiences has an emotion associated with it. So they start off in the morning thinking about their problems, and the moment they feel unhappy, now their body's in the past, because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And it's that feeling then that drives their thoughts, that produces more of the feeling, and their state of being is literally in the past. So the moment you decide to make a different choice, you're stepping out of known territory, because that conditioning process is conditioning the body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion. And now the body's literally in the past. So when you step out into the unknown, and now game is on, because you're going to hear the voices and you're going to hear the chatter and you're going to hear the sub-vocalizations for one reason, because the body emotionally is trying to convince you to think consistent with that emotion. So you make the same choice, you demonstrate the same behavior, you create the same experience to reaffirm that same emotion. Then people say, well, this feels right. No, that feels familiar. Yeah. So going from the old self to the new self, there is a neurological, biological, chemical, hormonal, genetic death of the old self. And crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self is what we admire about great people, whether it's Michael Jordan or William Wallace or Mahatma Gandhi or Didi Palmer. I mean, they just took a chance in possibility. Some people would rather cling to suffering and to unhappiness than to take a chance in the unknown. So then stress then becomes the one thing that people rely on in their outer environment for an arousal. And the arousal of fear, the arousal of aggression, the arousal of anger, the arousal of pain is really taking the body's energy and mobilizing it for some threat in the outer environment, real or imagined. Well, short term, no problem there. But if you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease. That's right. Because no organism can live in emergency mode for that extended period. Time. So what's the side effect? From a neurological standpoint, you are going to see a lot of incoherence in the thinking neocortex. In fact, the arousal causes a person to try to predict the future based on the past. So now they're overly analytical. And our research shows when you get overly analytical, 100% of the time, you're going to make your brain worse, without a doubt. Wow. You're going to drive it further into those elevated high beta states. Same thing happens. You're sitting in traffic and you're frustrated, you're impatient, you can't run, you can't fight, you can't hide. So in a sense, biologically, you're stepping on the gas and the brake. But what happens to the heart during the sympathetic response? It's beating, but now you're not using that energy. So then the arteries of the heart constrict, and now you're pushing against the closed system, and the heart becomes incoherent, and energy literally leaves the brain and heart. And now, in a sense, the hormones of stress draw from our field of energy and turn it into chemistry. We become more matter, less energy, more particle, less wave, and now we feel separate from everyone and everything, because those chemicals heighten the senses to narrow our focus on everything material. We become materialists. So then there's no time to dream and survival. Why would you dream? It's not a time to dream. It's not a time to create. So people spend 70+% of their time living in this aroused state. And so they don't believe in a new future, because if they can't see it, smell it, taste it, hear it, feel it, it doesn't exist. So then suppressed neocortical function, consciousness drops right out of the thinking neocortex. And the act of slowing down your brain waves all of a sudden causes different compartments of your brain that were incoherent, because the hormones of stress are saying, what about this? What about that? What about this person? What about that appointment? You start suppressing neocortical function. Here comes innate intelligence. Here comes the autonomic nervous system. And now they begin to merge. And the autonomic nervous system's job is to do what? Create balance. So it says, this person is getting beyond their identity. And when the autonomic nervous system moves in, the brain neocortex starts to synchronize. And what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain. And now what we see is the autonomic nervous system, when it's done properly, it turns on, Ron, to such a heightened degree of energy. We're talking 200, 300, 400, 500 standard deviations outside of normal. That's how much energy is in there. And I'll give you an example about standard deviations. If we took everybody who's listening to this call and we measured their eyesight as an example, you would see that Z curve exactly the same. No matter what we measured, where intelligence, eyesight, height, weight, you'd see the same curve. And that big part of the curve, if you draw a line right down the middle, that's normal. That makes up about 68% of the population. A little better eyesight, a little worse eyesight, but it's kind of normal. Then the curve drops down and you have about 12% here, 12% here, a little better eyesight, a little worse eyesight. Then it gets down to the bottom. And you got 2% really great eyesight, 2% really poor eyesight. That makes up 99.7% of the population. Is either 3 standard deviations above normal or 3 standard deviations below normal, no matter what we measure. Now, we're getting brainwave patterns with energy in an aroused state of gamma. That's 200, 300, 400, 500 times outside of normal. Now, when neuroscientists and researchers look at this, and it's all autonomic nervous system. So no, the autonomic nervous system's processing a very coherent, very orderly, very high frequency, and the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all those systems. So the person, all of a sudden, the arousal that they're feeling is an arousal of ecstasy. It's an arousal of bliss. They're connecting with innate, and its signature is pure love. I mean, or wholeness, whatever you want to call it, or ecstasy, a feeling that moves you into the present moment. Now, when that happens, the feeling's not coming from anything outside of them. It's coming from within them, and they stop looking out there for it, and they start realizing that innate intelligence is real within them. So then, when they start becoming conscious and interfacing with it, the side effect of that, many times, is an instantaneous biological upgrade. The person all of a sudden, why? Because that orderly signal, coherent signal that's being sent to every single cell in the body. is jiggling the cell with energy, and the cell begins to emit more light and information. And now all of a sudden, the body begins to produce a field. And according to the quantum model of reality, all disease is a lowering of frequency. You're becoming more matter, less energy. So now here we go. There's an upgrade energetically that happens in real time. And so the person comes back and says, I don't know what that was, but let me tell you something. It was more real than the betrayal I had 6 years ago, or more real than the trauma I had when I was 9. This is a moment where they're having a very, very profound removal of the past biologically.
I hope you enjoyed this amazing speech by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Before we start with Complete the Quote Challenge, hit the subscribe button and the bell button next to it. As you see, most of you guys that enjoy my videos are unsubscribed, so subscribe and don't miss my new videos. We'll continue with our daily challenge. Can you complete the inspiring quote and give us the right answer? If you can do it first, you're the daily winner. Many of you knew the right answer the last time, so congratulations to everyone with the correct answer. We were looking for 2 words, and the quote was Joe Dispenza's and goes like this. When you are observing the old self, you are no longer, and the correct answer was the program. So, when you are observing the old self, you are no longer the program. Today we also have the quote that belongs to Joe Dispenza, and it goes like this. When you think from your past memories, you can only create. So we are looking for 2 words, and I'm sure you will know the correct answer. Write your answer in the comments below the video. Even if you're not sure, try and guess. You might be the winner of this challenge. If you love this video and find it helpful, give your thumbs up and share it with your friends. Help me make this video more popular. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you don't miss my new videos and new challenges. So hit the bell button and you'll get noted when my new video is published. If you really like what we do here and want to support us, you can join our channel and our community for a symbolic fee and gain many other additional features. You can do that by clicking the join button next to the subscribe button, or you can click on the link in the description of this video. Stay good and have a great day!